Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're stepping away from, the usual cycle of headlines. We're aiming for a purely rational look. We've got a stack of sources here, and we're not just recounting events, we're analyzing the environment, the house itself, and the immediate human behaviors right after a traumatic discovery.
Exactly. Our goal is purely analytical. Think of it like we're walking into what our sources call the ultimate theater, the Ramsey residence. But our lens is forensic criminology, deductive logic, and psychological drivers. We're looking at the house's layout, the behaviors, treating them as clues to motive, clues to meaning.
Right.
The sources frame this place as both a sanctuary and, well, tragically, a kind of containment field for disaster. There's this intense friction between extreme privacy and then suddenly brutal public chaos.
Yeah, and our focus isn't trying to solve anything per se. It's about scrutinizing the inconsistencies. We're looking for those gaps. Where the behavior, the physical stuff, the statements where they just don't quite mesh. We want to understand what these clues tell us about human nature under, unimaginable pressure. Does that pressure lead to denial, fear, or maybe something more calculated, control?
Pressure reveals.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Okay, let's unpack this first part. It starts with this structural and psychological puzzle. The massive difference between how the family felt about their safety and the actual physical reality of their home. John Ramsey, in statements later, often talked about Boulder life with this sort of almost innocence, believing it was a safe community, that people were, quote, basically pretty good people.
Right.
He even called it misplaced trust explicitly.
And that misplaced trust, that's the key phrase, isn't it? It's the whole basis for the illusion of safety they had. It's like a psychological security blanket. Bolstered by their wealth, the neighborhood's reputation, they sort of thought their social standing was the security system.
Yeah.
But then you look at how they reacted after the tragedy that tells the real story about that failed expectation. And that's where the forensic analysis gets really interesting.
And the reaction was, extreme. Sources detail that when they moved to Atlanta, Patsy put in gates, fences, and a sophisticated security system.
Big ones.
John literally called the new place a fortress. That's not a small adjustment, is it? It was a huge, dramatic swing.
It absolutely is. It shows the massive gulf between how they saw the world before expecting goodness and the harsh reality they suddenly faced.
That fortress mentality is almost like a confession about the old house, isn't it?
Exactly. The sheer scale of the Atlanta security is like a silent admission. The Boulder house was fundamentally insecure. Which brings us straight to that critical inconsistency. It's even confirmed in court documents. Wolf v. Ramsey conceding the house was not secure that night, December 25th into the 26th.
Right.
And crucially, the security alarm, the one they had, it was not turned on.
And we're not talking about just forgetting to lock the front door, are we? This seems more pervasive.
Oh, definitely not just one door. It points to a whole culture, really, of relaxed security, almost complacency, maybe. And get this, the sources say investigators found at least 7 windows and 1 door open that morning. 7.
7 windows and a door.
Yeah. Patsy later said something quite poignant about it, regretful. He said in Atlanta they always use the alarm, but in Boulder they just let down our guard. It really suggests that feeling of safety, maybe the affluence, it just sort of overrode basic security habits. Common sense, really.
So, the security wasn't physical, it was psychological, an expectation. But what happens when that expectation is just shattered? This takes us to the basement window theory, right? The possible entry point, which is fascinating because of what it implies about familiarity.
Yes, John mentioned it, and investigators looked closely. He said it was found cracked open, and there was a large suitcase under it, possibly used to climb out.
The suitcase? Like an improvised step stool?
Could be. But from a forensic view, the location of this window is incredibly important. Documents confirm it was ground level, yes, but, and this is key, it was hidden from the front of the house and from neighbors.
Hidden implies secrecy. Planning, maybe.
Precisely. Think about it. An intruder choosing that specific route, having to go around the house, find this secluded window, maybe deal with landscaping. It suggests they had time, confidence, and crucially, foreknowledge. They picked the path optimized for stealth. And then there's the house itself. It wasn't small. A huge, sprawling, 4-story Victorian thing.
Right.
Navigating that place purposefully, especially finding your way around the basement areas, it really demanded, as the source says, a degree of familiarity.
You wouldn't just stumble into that, would you? If you were random, wouldn't you try a front door or one of the other 7 open windows you mentioned?
Exactly my point. Why the most hidden, arguably most difficult entry point, unless you knew it offered the best cover? It suggests someone highly invested in not being seen.
Either because they knew the family's habits or because they needed significant time inside.
It immediately makes the random drifter idea harder to swallow. The house's complexity itself demands an explanation. How did an intruder get the mental map to navigate from that obscure window to where things happened, likely in the dark?
That level of knowledge points strongly towards familiarity, doesn't it?
It certainly raises serious questions about the stranger theory right from the start.
Okay, this is where things get really central to our analysis, I think, the psychological drivers.
Yeah.
There's this fundamental logical knot in the intruder theory. It's like the family's narrative suggests they know everything about the perpetrator's methods and intent, but absolutely nothing about who it could be.
That's the core paradox, yes. It's the central, glaring issue with the narrative put forward by the family and their team. On one hand, they claim they were watched, targeted, studied, that the intruder knew their routines intimately, the house layout, specific vulnerabilities, even, supposedly, which staircase Patsy used 95% of the time.
Incredible detail. But then, on the other hand, they offered, quote, zero concrete information about identity, motive, or opportunity. Zero.
Exactly.
So if the surveillance was that close, that professional, why didn't they notice anything? No weird feeling about someone at a party, no worker hanging around too long, no strange car.
It's the big deductive question, isn't it? If the stalker was so sophisticated, how were they completely invisible beforehand, yet somehow all-knowing?
And then they offer these, expert-level theories about the stalker and detailed critiques of police mistakes.
Right, and that's the pivot. Where does that analytical knowledge come from if you claim total non-involvement, total victimhood? A genuine victim is usually lost in traumatic confusion, overwhelmed by not knowing. To cross that line, to become a proactive analyst critiquing the investigation, that requires a position of knowledge. That gap needs explaining.
But couldn't you argue, maybe, that extreme trauma makes people lash out? They might obsessively critique the police simply because it's the only thing they can focus on, even if they're innocent.
That's a fair point. Trauma does trigger intense coping mechanisms, absolutely. But what we see here, arguably, is more specific than just generalized grief or anger. It looks more like a psychological drive, we could call.
Yeah.
Defensive omniscience.
Defensive omniscience.
Yeah. It's a stance that lets you critique and sort of control the narrative. You appear engaged, knowledgeable about the case's flaws, but the critique itself deflects suspicion from you. It's like an intellectual shield.
Wow. Maintaining that.
Yeah.
That must take incredible mental effort. Constantly.
It really does. And from a forensic criminology standpoint, it fits a pattern. Sometimes the person responsible feels this compulsion to stay close to the investigation, to monitor it, maybe subtly guide it away from dangerous areas, all while seeming helpful. Denial plays a huge role here. It lets you compartmentalize. You can almost start to believe your own alternative narrative because facing the truth is just psychologically unbearable.
All that energy goes into managing the story, not processing the trauma.
Potentially, which leads us to the physiological side, the contradiction there.
Right, because genuine, unexpected shock.
Yeah.
That triggers a massive stress response, right? Cognitive functions go offline, memory gets hazy, you can barely think straight. That's biology.
Precisely. Cortisol floods the system. If they were truly uninvolved victims experiencing sudden, horrific shock, you'd expect confusion, rambling, difficulty recalling basic details. But what was observed instead? A remarkably rapid shift into strategic thinking. Lawyers were called before the police even asked for formal interviews. The narrative was tightly controlled almost from minute one.
That doesn't sound like the cognitive collapse of shock.
It suggests something different, doesn't it? More like the heightened alertness that comes with recognizing an acute danger, a danger you perhaps understand and are actively trying to manage.
Okay, let's zero in on that contrast. Forensic criminology talks about cooperative desperation.
Yeah.
Innocent families, they just want answers. They submit to everything, tests, interviews, searches.
Anything to find the truth. They hound the police, sometimes become almost too cooperative.
Versus what we saw here, which feels more like immediate legal barriers.
The contrast is incredibly stark and immediate. Innocent families typically worry about solving the crime, not protecting themselves from the investigators. So when a family secures top-tier legal help before a single formal question is asked, it strongly suggests a foreknowledge that questions are going to be a problem.
What were they anticipating? What specific problem?
That's the million-dollar question. They were clearly protecting the legal boundary around themselves, their statements. That immediate resistance suggests the priority shifted instantly from open cooperation to, well, legal defense and maybe reputation management. It implies an acute awareness that the investigation might focus on them, and they were ready for that before it even happened.
Okay, and looping back to the surveillance inconsistency. If this alleged stalker was so sophisticated, so professional, that they left zero trace beforehand, no witnesses, no cameras.
A ghost.
Right, a ghost.
Yeah.
How does that square with the crime scene itself, which sources describe as chaotic, improvised, emotionally charged, involving that very bizarre long ransom note?
It doesn't square easily at all. That's a major logical hurdle for the sophisticated stalker theory. You can't really be an invisible planning genius and a messy, amateurish perpetrator leaving weird personal notes and maybe forgetting to secure the exit window.
So one narrative contradicts the other.
Pretty much. Either the detailed surveillance story is a construct, built later to explain how an outsider could know so much, or the sheer chaos of the scene undermines the idea of a stealthy professional intruder. It functions almost like a convenient explanation, doesn't it? It solves the problem of how an intruder knew things, but it doesn't require actually identifying who knew them or how.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly, back to the house itself. Not just security flaws, but the opportunities the structure created. That place was huge, 4 stories.
Yeah.
It created compartments, right?
Exactly. The architecture itself created opportunity. Compartmentalization is the key word. Sounds made on one floor, especially in certain areas, simply wouldn't carry easily to others.
So things could happen without anyone else knowing immediately.
And as the source material points out, this opportunity cuts both ways. Yes, the size could allow an intruder to move around undetected for a while, but it also means actions could potentially be taken by someone inside without alerting other family members in different parts of the house. The building itself, just by its layout, resisted easy observation or awareness.
There's something unsettling about that idea, isn't there? That people under the same roof can be so physically separated, living parallel lives, almost unknowable to each other at times.
It challenges our usual assumptions about family life, especially in a single home, that idea of constant shared awareness. Maybe it's not always the reality in very large spaces.
And didn't Patsy herself mention this, the idea of acoustic blind spot?
She did. She specifically noted she wouldn't hear JonBenet's bathroom from the master bedroom. That's a crucial detail. Anyone familiar with those sound patterns, whether it's a family member who lives there or an intruder who studied the place, understands the limits of perception. They know where the zones of silence are.
And they could operate within them, knowing where sound traveled and where it didn't.
It becomes a tactical advantage, doesn't it? Knowing you can do something without being immediately heard by the key people, the adults in the house.
Okay, layer onto that the physiological factor, the time of year, the context. Late December, right after Christmas. Exhaustion.
Absolutely critical context. Holiday rush, social events, wrapping up the year. People are run down. John specifically needed sleep. He had pilot duties. Patsy was likely managing everything, probably exhausted too.
And when you're that depleted, sleep is deeper, awareness is lower.
Precisely. Your body craves deep, restorative sleep. This creates a physiological window where awareness is naturally at its lowest ebb. It maximizes the opportunity for anyone moving through the house, internal or external, to do so undetected.
It's the optimal time for something to happen quietly.
It is. Now let's look at the timeline and the family routine. We know earlier that day, Patsy was wrapping gifts in the basement while the kids played upstairs.
Right, suggesting a pattern of, like, periodic check-ins maybe, but not constant hovering supervision.
Exactly. And that pattern points to something we might call supervised independence. It's common in families with means, large homes. Kids have more physical freedom within the house. It's based on the assumption that the house itself is safe. The walls are the protection. But this freedom, this space, it inherently creates opportunities that just don't exist in a smaller home where everyone's basically within earshot.
Okay, so we have this routine of independence, these acoustic blind spots, the exhaustion factor. But the official story kind of paints a picture of everyone tucked in bed relatively early, right? Everyone asleep.
That's the narrative presented, yes. But is it the full picture? Could that neat timeline mask something a bit more complex?
Meaning?
Well, think about it. If Patsy was still up late, maybe 11 p.m., maybe midnight finishing packing, tidying up before that early flight, that wouldn't be unusual for a mother managing a trip. Right?
No, not at all. Last-minute things.
And if she was still up and about, making noise, maybe the children heard her, maybe they didn't feel they had to be rigidly asleep yet, JonBenet might have gone downstairs, maybe for a snack, a drink, maybe just following the sound of her mom. Any number of reasons, as the source suggests. It opens possibilities.
Which leads us to what you call the pilot detail challenge.
Okay.
This is interesting. John needed rest. He was flying the plane. Serious responsibility.
Crucial. His need for sleep was non-negotiable.
But Patsy and the kids, they were passengers. They could sleep on the plane the next morning. It's a 5-hour flight right now.
Exactly. There wasn't the same urgent physiological need for them to be deeply asleep by, say, 10 or 11 p.m.
So this detail, it kind of challenges the necessity of that strict, early, everyone sound asleep narrative for everyone except John.
It does. If Patsy could have reasonably been awake later, then the certainty that the children were also in deep, undisturbed sleep becomes, well, less certain. And that detail, as the analysis puts it, opens up possibilities that the official narrative forecloses. It suggests the event could have happened later, during hours when people were potentially still active.
And if it happened when people were still milling about, even quietly,
then the need for a super stealthy external intruder who gets in, does everything, and gets out without encountering anyone or making any noise, that need diminishes somewhat, doesn't it? It changes the probability landscape.
Okay, shifting to the immediate aftermath now. The response, and this is where analytically things get really distinct. The almost instant creation of this fortress mentality. I mean, the timing of the extraordinary preemption, as the sources call it. Attorney Mike Bynum arriving, limiting police access while the crime scene was still being processed, before any formal interrogation, before anyone was even accused.
That move, viewed through a logical forensic lens, is, well, it's extraordinary, highly unusual. The immediate setup of legal barriers like that strongly suggests someone anticipated where the investigation was likely headed.
And how do you anticipate that unless you have some reason to believe it should head your way?
That's the deductive leap, isn't it? It's not the typical behavior of someone expecting quick exoneration because they believe a random intruder is obviously responsible.
It brings up this really deep conflict, doesn't it, between fundamental legal rights and psychological transparency.
Right.
Everyone has the right to a lawyer, full stop.
Absolutely fundamental. Can't argue with that.
But the timing matters psychologically, right?
Yeah.
An innocent person, generally, accessing the investigation will clear them. They don't usually think their first move needs to be protecting themselves from the investigators.
The impulse to lawyer up that quickly, that aggressively, it's almost always born of fear. But the crucial analytical question is, fear of what exactly? Was it a general fear? Fear of being misunderstood, having their reputation shredded by suspicion, which is a valid concern for prominent people? Or was it a more specific, acute fear? Fear that the investigation would uncover something concrete that implicated them.
What did they think the police might find?
That's the question hanging in the air. Psychologically, that posture screams control, distance.
Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it from the perspective of someone who might have done something terrible. Their overwhelming need is to create distance between themselves and discovery. Maximum distance. They need to control the information flow, what gets out, how it's spun. It's driven by this primal, desperate instinct for self-preservation.
So the pattern becomes protection first, cooperation second.
Yeah.
Treating investigators like a threat.
Exactly. A threat to be managed, contained, kept at arm's length, rather than a resource to be fully embraced to find the truth.
And the forensic impact of doing that so early, especially regarding that critical window, the first 48 hours.
Devastating. Criminologists rely heavily on those first hours. Memories are freshest, less rehearsed. Spontaneous statements, unfiltered reactions. They can reveal unconscious truths.
But by getting lawyers involved immediately,
they effectively slammed that window shut. They guaranteed investigators would never get their unfiltered immediate responses. Everything provided after that point was certain to be carefully considered, legally vetted, strategically framed.
It's like they knew the danger of saying too much too soon, before maybe getting the story straight.
A guilty party often instinctively understands that. They need time to align their narrative, perhaps with whatever evidence they fear might emerge. Closing that window of vulnerability is a calculated defensive move.
We also have to factor in the sort of anthropology of class here, don't we? Their wealth meant they could mobilize top lawyers instantly. That's not an option for most people.
The social and financial capital is hugely significant. It allowed them to deploy a sophisticated legal defense before the police had even finished collecting basic evidence at the scene. And for people in their social strata, the fear of social annihilation public ruin, reputation destroyed, is a powerful motivator. It's a cultural logic that might demand that defensive posture, almost regardless of guilt or innocence.
So it creates this ambiguity, doesn't it? Is it innocent people protecting their reputation because they know how suspicion works? Or is it guilty people protecting themselves from legal jeopardy?
It serves both purposes, potentially. It's a very effective shield either way, which leads right into the development of the counter-narrative.
Ah, right. The idea of turning the tables.
It's a tactically brilliant, if cynical, move. You frame yourself as the victim of the investigation. Every act of non-cooperation, every legal barrier gets reframed as proof that the police are biased, incompetent, persecuting you.
So your defensiveness becomes evidence against the investigators.
Precisely. It flips the script. Every refusal, every delay, every pointed critique is presented as justified pushback against unfair treatment. It's a psychological defense mechanism that makes a thorough investigation incredibly difficult. The authorities end up spending half their time defending their own actions instead of just focusing on the crime.
Which circles us back to that final, really probing point about the preemption, the timing. Legal counsel was secured physically present while JonBenet's body was still in the house.
Still there.
What innocent parent, in that raw, horrific moment of discovery, what innocent parent's absolute first priority is calling a lawyer? Before even bombarding the police with desperate questions, what happened? Who did this? Find them.
That specific detail. The priority given to legal defense over seemingly more natural, immediate investigative cooperation, it speaks volumes. Volumes about their perception of danger, their need for control. It strongly suggests they knew right from the outset that this investigation was inevitably going to focus on them. And they prepared for that fight before the first round had even begun. The speed itself is behavioral evidence. #shag outro.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We tried to step back from the emotion and just analyze the logic or lack thereof in the physical evidence, the behavioral responses. We looked at that paradox, didn't we? The vulnerable fortress, the house that felt safe but was wide open. And the psychological weight of that defensive omniscience, knowing everything and nothing. And, of course, the implications of that immediate preemptive legal strategy.
Right. Every piece, every clue, every behavior, the hidden window, the acoustic blind spots, the instant lawyers, it all tells us something about human nature under extreme duress. Whether that nature reveals denial or deep fear or maybe something more like calculated control and self-preservation, the architecture of the house created opportunity. The response architecture revealed psychology.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the literal architecture, the bricks and mortar, the layout, the timelines that seem off. But maybe as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you, for the listener, to kind of mull over. We've analyzed the physical walls of that house. But what if the real containment field, the real fortress in this whole story, wasn't the building itself? What if it was the complex psychological walls we construct around ourselves, the ones we build to hide unbearable truths? Sometimes, maybe, even from ourselves.
Indeed. The architecture of the mind, often far more intricate and far harder to map than any building. Something to keep questioning. Until next time.